Hey there, friends. How's it going? It's the day after Thanksgiving here in the US, and everybody is out in the world spending money. And I try to avoid the day after Thanksgiving here like the plague because I get really irritated with people really easily on days like this. But because everyone is out and doing that, I get to stay home and do this. And it does seem appropriate on, the biggest shopping day in the year in the US to look at the Suit of Pentacles. So that's what we're going to do. I hope you all had a good Thanksgiving if you were celebrating that yesterday and that your week has been good otherwise. I baked all my pies on Thursday. I love to bake. And you'll see this embarrassing. I had a little moment with my potato peeler while I was peeling apples. So I ran out of Band-Aids, but I don't leave the house on Black Friday generally. So I have Scotch tape while I wait for the parking lots to clear. Whatever, it's fine. It's just my nail, which is stupid, but I get very excited when I'm cooking, and sometimes that's a bad thing. I also had an interesting conversation very briefly with my mom yesterday. And, I was talking about how I haven't really been on Facebook much and how I've been really focusing that energy on Instagram. And she mentioned my posts on Instagram about tarot. And she's like, yeah, I just have to scroll right past those. It scares me. And she talked, briefly about how she had two really bad experiences. And that upset me. Not that I care that she, scrolls past those posts. You should look at whatever you want to look at. But I feel like, and maybe this is a controversial thing to say, I feel like it's an irresponsible reader who makes people afraid and uses tarot to predict doom, which I think, she didn't go into all the details, but I know that in one instance, she told me one story once. And I don't know, I guess, there's a line in the community between people who will predict anything they see and those of us who don't view ourselves primarily as predictors. This gets into territory that I'm always, because I don't want to insult anybody, but I feel like, just from a sustainability standpoint, anyone who's working with this should not be trying to make people afraid of it, and what I want for people who watch these videos is to not be afraid of it. I also want the people who I read for to not be afraid of it, because I came at it from fear as well and curiosity, and somehow curiosity won over. But I found it a really beautiful thing, and there's never anything that's shown up that ultimately was scary. And I guess again that comes from style and not the cards themselves. But anyway, what I want for people is to not be afraid of this stuff, because it's actually really amazing and beautiful most of the time, all of the time. So that's my rant on that. I should also mention, since we use the Fountain Tarot, or I use the Fountain Tarot in these videos, that it is the day after Thanksgiving 2016, and the folks who make the Fountain Tarot are having a buy one get one sale on their website this weekend. So you literally get 2 decks of them for the price of one. So if you've been eyeing this deck, or someone who has, like, take advantage of that. Why not fill up your tarot goodie bag? So anyway, this is the end of my typical rant before talking about the suits. Hence why these videos are 900 hours long. So the Suit of Pentacles. I love the Suit of Pentacles. I find it, I talked about in the Wands video how the Wands are my favorite suit because my work is creative. But the Suit of Pentacles to me is so many things all at once. And that may be why some folks have a hard time reading it. In a way, obviously, it represents the element of earth. And so there's a groundedness to the suit. And it is why we think about the Suit of Pentacles in terms of money, because, for good or ill, we live in a world where money is what makes things possible. It's not just about um, having an ability or having the desire to do something. Um, we are grounded by finances, at least the in the world where this is popular at the moment. So there's that element to it. But it also touches on things that affect us every day. So our work and our jobs, our family. So we get away from money and we get into the everyday. I always use the word banal, but that's not. It sounds worse than it is, because the thing about the Suit of Pentacles is that it's banal in that it's the stuff we think about every day, but it's also the important stuff. It's the stuff that um, takes up most of our time, and so we do get Earth in that way. So we do get jobs and family and finances. But the other thing that's interesting, there I said it again. The other thing that fascinates me about the Suit of Pentacles is that when it is a pentacle, and I prefer pentacles over any other representation so far, uh, particularly over coins, which I feel like seems to limit itself, And I know that that's more actually traditional, but I just think that when it's coins, it just says money. But what I like about the Suit of Pentacles is the idea that the pentacle represents all of the elements. So within the Suit of Pentacles, yes, we have money and finances and work and family and the banality, but we also have every other element. So we do have fire, water, air, and the spiritual element at work here too. So the pentacles to me are sort of the culmination of all the other suits in a way, and they tie into all the other suits. So that's one thing that I try to remind myself of when I start getting to um stereotypical with the pentacles and too sort of money based. um Another thing, and it's the antithesis of what I just said, is that there's a practicality to the pentacles, again, because they are earth. They're very grounded. And when I see a lot of pentacles in a reading, I feel like it's either a sign that the person is really grounded or needs some grounding energy. And so just from an energetic standpoint, uh, we can't be a lightning rod all the time without something to ground us. The other elements to me are so much themselves. Water may be the gentlest of the other three, but it is very watery and it is very fluid and in a way wishy-washy. Fire, I talked about in the wands video. Air, again, can cause a lot of huffing and puffing and blowing your house down. The pentacles have a more practical and a more grounded and a more stable quality in a way, because it's earth is what we walk on. It's what connects us to um our home. So there's that in there too. I'm getting very philosophical about the pentacles. um it's about being in the world and not about being in the stratosphere, and sometimes that's important and good. It's the pentacles are not about having your head in the clouds. um they're about having your feet on the ground in a good way a lot of the time. And it's also partly about being a citizen of the world. I think that there are found in the suit elements of the virtues. Charity shows its face here quite a bit. Resourcefulness and collaboration and community. These are things that show up in the pentacles in ways that are more balanced and even and again grounded than in the other suits. So there's that to this. It's about giving and receiving in a lot of ways. It's about then the daily things of life, chores, income. So the Suit of Pentacles, really, really deep. I think deeper than sometimes we give it credit for. And certainly, even talking about it right now, I find myself challenging myself to go more deeply into the cards of the Pentacles suit when I see them in readings than I tend to. But I'm very wandsy and airy in my way, and so I need that really grounding element here. And I said in the wands video that the wands really rely on all the other elements to ground them. I think the all the elements need pentacles to ground them. So that's that. So let's get into the cards one by one, as we do. And with this Ace of Pentacles, um, I really adore the Suit of Pentacles in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. I really, really do. And this is my favorite ace of all the aces that I know. And I think it's the garden that just gets me. I mean, it just looks like a place you want to be. But I love the Ace of Pentacles in general. And so because you have a very earthy quality to it, I think that this does represent sort of a freshness. There's the scent of like freshly tilled earth with the Ace of Pentacles. You know, it's ground ready to be planted, but not planted yet. You know, it's that those first slightly warm days of spring, you know, when the air is kind of cool still but the sun is really warm, you know, those days. That sort of is what the Ace of Pentacles feels like. So then we get into the more practical side of this. So, you know, there is a fresh start or a new beginning. You know, this could, because we are talking about family and daily life, this may be a new job, this may be starting a family, this may be a new house or a living arrangement, a new lease on life. But overall, there is that sense of possibility here, I feel like, with more even than the other aces, where the ground is just ready to be to spring to life, you know. So there's this amazing sense of potential energy. um you know, it's interesting too, because when you think about planting seeds, which is what the Ace of Pentacles feels like, you know, on their own the seeds don't have much energy. They're waiting to be released, and the dirt in its way doesn't have much energy. But when those two things come together, they're able to produce all of these amazing things. And so you get that sense of possibility, of being on the edge of something happening, which I really love with the Ace of Pentacles. Um, and then, you know, you do get the more negative impact with these cards as well. So this could be a delayed start. It could be literally like resisting a focus on the everyday. You know what I mean? Of really wanting to be with your head in the clouds, and life doesn't want that from you. Life needs something else from you. You may need to sort of break free from something that feels banal and uninspiring, needing income or needing a new job, needing something new. So there's like a missingness, an absence of, when the ace has a negative connotation, where something new is necessary or potential is squandered. Do you know what I mean? So this is it's again, it's like it's the Ace of Pentacles needs something else to release its potential, but it's there lying in wait. You know, it's coiled and ready to spring. It just needs the other element. It needs the seed to spring to life. But when they come together, it really springs to life. And in that way, there's kind of a sexual aspect to the card too. So, you know, this could indicate I said earlier, starting a family. This may be a card we might see when folks are trying to start a family. It may be the beginning, or, you know, it may represent folks who are, quote, trying, you know, like we hear on sitcoms, we're trying. So there's that element there too. Or the borning of a project, you know, the seed of an idea. If you have this with the Ace of Wands, for example, there's the potential for a project that could really bring a lot of success. And then with the wands and the pentacles together, there is that sort of coming together, sort of sexualized energy, that could make things spring to life and create. So that's the ace. The two is one of the most interesting cards. I did it again. It is interesting now. Because it you know, this is one of those cards where when I see it in a reading, I'm always like, ugh. Because it just seems so obvious in a way. It's not the kind of card that you feel like you can really climb into. But what this really comes down to is the simplicity of this suit. And it is less heady than the rest of the suits. And so in the Two of Wands, we get a less heady experience. You know what I mean? Where with the Two of Swords, there's this meditative state, this balancing, this uncomfortable internal exploration of the, of the mind and ideas. With the Two of Swords, there's this searching out in the distance and considering plans. What you've got in the Suit of Pentacles is like life is happening and you've got to juggle all this shit. You know what I mean? You've got to make it happen, and there's a lot being asked of you, and it's work. It takes energy and work, and there are times where we feel in life like all we're doing is juggling everything that's required of us, of keeping all our plates spinning. And so you get that energy here. You get the energy of work-life balance. For those of us who work, career type jobs, we can have times where our job is taking more energy from us than any other part of our life, and we can feel drained by that, and there's an absence of balance there. And so we get that sense with this card too. So depending on how it falls in the reading and what your intuition is telling you and what you know about the querent, it may be that they're doing a good job, or that there is a need for balance that's absent. If you read reversals, that if it's reversed, you can read it one way or the other. If you don't, you just sort of have to trust what's around it and what you know about the person you're reading for. There's a sense of trying to have it all here, of attempting to focus and finding that difficult, of trying to do everything at once. With the twos, there's always the option of choice. There's a thinking about options. So, there's a weighing of possibilities here. Do I take this job or that job, or do I, work on this project or that project? But it's not as romantic as the wands say. This is really much more, again, practical. You could be in a situation when you're trying to decide what bills to pay, which Paul will you borrow from in order to pay Peter? So what you're gonna do to make ends meet in that way. You could also, this could be like doing research and weighing options before buying something, checking consumer reports, reading reviews, weighing the options. This could indicate having to sing for your supper. It could be making a living out of a creative act, if you look at the Rider Waite Smith image literally. So you get a very, gesture-ish thing. So you may have to sing for your supper here. This may be an actor. This may be someone who's making a living doing something performance-based. The contrast to that then is really not being able to juggle, or not being able to keep all our plates spinning, having a work-life imbalance, realizing that we can't have it all. That we have to choose what's possible. We have to settle, as I talked about in the Cups videos. This could also indicate not being able to make a living at something impractical. So we may want, for example, as a playwright, I would love to make my living doing that, but the reality is that there's no money in that. So I have a job that I really like, but I don't make my living doing the thing that I love. You know what I mean? Even with this, I don't make a living doing tarot readings. I love it. But it's never brought me much money at all. Most of the readings I do, I end up, even when people ask, they want to buy a reading from me, I have a tendency to say, don't worry, I'll, tell your friends and I'll give it to you for free. So there's that sense there. There's not being able to sing for your supper, not wanting to sell out. You know what I mean? So if this card comes up in a reading that's full of creative potential, and you're seeing this in a negative light, it may be not wanting to sell out, when sometimes selling out is the way we move ahead. So there's the two. The three I really like, and it's always interesting to see how this is interpreted from deck to deck, because there's the quintessential three people in the Waite Smith deck. Many decks that I have do not feature more than one person. And to me, that really changes the meaning of the card, because in a lot of ways, this for me is about subverting your own ego for part of the greater good. And why the Smith drawing is probably my favorite, is because though I don't have a religious bent, what you get is this idea of these three people coming together to build a cathedral. And I think about the oh god, the book is going to escape me. Pillars of the Earth, I think, that great book, that giant book, where you have these stories of all these people essentially coming together to build this great work of engineering marvel. There may be the priest who initiates it, and the architect who designs it, and the builders who make it, and the community that supports it and raises the money for it. All of that is in service of some greater good. And that's what this card to me is about. It's about subverting your own ego in order to become part of the collaboration. The wands are very solo in their way. You're fighting the battle alone. You are doing the work by yourself. Whenever you do creative work, the early phases of it are frequently alone. If you're a composer, you're sitting there with your piano or your software or whatever, and you're hearing the music and you're putting it down on paper, but that doesn't come to life until an orchestra plays it, or until the musician until there's an audience hearing it. As a playwright, again, you can work and work and work and work, but until a director and actors and an audience come along, all you have is a one-dimensional object. Until a writer has a reader, the words aren't saying anything. The words need to be received in order to actually have meaning. Even with tarot, you need someone to read for. Even if that someone is yourself, there needs to be an other for the reading to mean much of anything. And so to become part of the collective, we subvert our ego and we engage in the process. And that's, to me, what the three is really all about. And because of that, I really love and hate it, because there are times where that's beautiful and wonderful and great, and there are times where it makes you want to pull your hair out, because you don't have the ability to do whatever you want once it becomes a collaboration. So the three is really a powerful card for me in that way. And I'm just going through my notes really quickly to see if I left something out. It's a team effort, a group a small community. This could indicate like a collective or a commune in some ways. But then again, the negative of that is either subverting yourself so much that your work gets washed away or washed out, and you don't take credit for your portion of it, or an inability to collaborate, and again, being kind of a diva and not being able to let your ego step back enough to become part of the larger whole. So in that case, you really, really get two sides of the same coin. It's all about collaboration, but it's how we engage in it. Is it in a balanced way, or is it in an imbalanced way? And I obviously the decks that I chose to work with here I really love. This is the only image of the three that I really think encapsulates the three. But with that said, in a way, I'm always reading this deck. I'm always reading this deck. It's a weird thing, when you start with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck and you learn it and you spend years with it and its clones. And, in my early years of reading, it was either this or the Hanson Roberts, which I don't even know where that is now. I stopped reading with the Hanson Roberts deck because as lovely as it is, I started finding it just too cute for me, and again, too white. And I accept that in a weird way from the Waite-Smith, because it was, it was created in the early 20th century. More modern decks, I have a harder time accepting that. So anyway, but this deck, this card of all of these is really the only one that encapsulates the Three of Pentacles for me. I'm always okay with the Wild Unknown because the images are so subtle that I'm projecting this onto it in a way. But I don't know. Even in her image here, this is the suit that almost kept me from the Wild Unknown in a lot of ways, because I didn't get. It took me a while to figure out how to draw. Excuse me, how to draw the lines, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But in the sort of connectedness of these three pentacles and this mountain, you do get a sense of a collective, a connected something becoming part of something larger, and sort of the smallness of that effort in the face of something large. So I do get the sense of like the unity of the three, the mountain and the cathedral, the sort of natural world versus the man-made world. But it suggests this, but it took me a while to figure that out and to get there. It's funny with this deck because I adore it, and I know a lot of people do, and I know a lot of people really don't respond to it. And I was thinking as I was preparing, because this is I'm gonna go right to the 7 in this deck, which is this card. The 7, I'm gonna come back to this, almost kept me from buying it. And again, this has become my most used deck. But it's funny, because it claimed you. You don't claim decks so much as they claim you. If I could choose any deck to be my primary deck, it would be the Fountain Tarot. It does not read as well for me as the Wild Unknown for some reason, and it's just the weird thing about tarot. Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent. What I was trying to get around to is that no matter what deck I'm reading, I'm always seeing the Rider-Waite-Smith images in my head and comparing them. And it's just become second nature to me, but it does help. And it's made me wonder if I could read with a more Marseille-style deck, because I've never done that before. I stayed away from it. But after all these years, the Rider-Waite-Smith is so internal that I think I could, because I would immediately default to those images in my head. The thing about the Wild Unknown that I really like is I don't find myself distracted by the images. This is an example where I prefer Waite-Smith to anything else, but there are times where the image stumps me and something subtler doesn't, because what I need comes out of the card for some reason, so I may not have the three people in the cathedral when I'm doing a reading, but sometimes the literalness of the image there stumps me in a reading, and then this makes me go, oh, you're part of something really big, right? You know what I mean? Whatever. Anyway, I'm this is what I do. I go on tangents. This is the 3, and it's probably my favorite card in the Suit of Pentacles. No, that's a lie. It's my second favorite, and I'll talk about that more later. The 4 is another card that is frequently, like the 2, very rigidly interpreted as like miserliness. But a lot of you out there who watch my videos have commented on this and other things. And I, over the years, have started to interpret it this way too, as that, yes, I do view this as a sort of conservatism or a protectiveness, a Scrooge-like Dickensian, miserliness. But the Fountain Tarot here really succeeds for me because there's this protectiveness. And so what we get, especially as we move into the 5, is that if we're not wise with our money, we can end up really stuck. And so there's a cry for moderation and keeping in this card, and that's not always a bad thing. We can't give beyond our means, because if we become destitute, we can't help anybody. So sometimes you do need to hold on. Sometimes you do need to protect yourself, protect your resources, protect your finances, even protect your work. Sometimes work isn't ready to be viewed or shown. Early drafts, early iterations, that stuff, the experiments that lead up to the eventual finished product, those things you do need to keep close to your chest. And so with the 4 of Pentacles, you do get sometimes that requirement of keeping and holding on to. So, there is that element to it. Saving is not bad, saving for a rainy day, being protective of what you've earned, being conscious of having to hold your place or protect your assets. Those are things that life demands of us. So in that way, sometimes this, quote, miserliness is necessary. And we get that with the 4. This could just very simply indicate frugality or banking. This may be someone who works in a bank. If you're looking at, who does this represent? But we can read miserliness into this. So there can be stinginess, there can be clinging to it, being withholding, or flaunting your wealth, using, a carrot and a stick to get people to do things. If you do this, I'll give you this. Oh, if you do a little bit more, I'll give you, you know what I mean? Sort of the negative thing of incentivizing, basically. I wrote in my notes at some point ostentatiousness, and I don't quite know what made me think of that now, but it is interesting to think about um, ostentatiousness. Is that how you? Ostentation? Is that a word? As a side effect of this card, because it makes me think of the mansions in Newport, Rhode Island, which is very close to where I live, which was like, we have money and we're going to show it off. That's really what those houses were about. They called them cottages, but they rivaled anything you'd see on Downton Abbey if you've ever been out there. So ostentatiousness is interesting here too, but there's a protectiveness, a sheltering. Sometimes I wonder, if this were a political figure or someone who has a lot of money, if this indicates like offshore banking, or someone who's not paying their taxes or not paying their dues. There's that element too. The Suit of Pentacles really fascinates me because I think it can be so much more layered than when we're learning we give it credit for. And that's okay, because we need simple concepts when we're starting out. So if we don't do what the four counsels, then we can end up with the stereotypical definition of the five, which is, destitution, basically. And this is among the cards we don't really want to see in a reading, because there's a being shut out, there's a poverty, a coldness, there's a want. This card really does remind me of Dickens, because it's so dramatically, Tiny Tim. It's very Christmas Carol-esque. And really many decks give us exactly what Pamela Coleman Smith gave us. She's sort of encapsulated this, even though a lot of esoteric thinkers find that the Waite Smith deck really goes to like the cheap joke, so to speak, the cheapest imaging of the concepts of the esoteric concepts of this card. Boys and girls, this happens in life, I mean, we don't want to deal with it, but there are times we are shut out in the cold. This card makes me think of a time I spent a winter without heat. I had I had no gas in my apartment, so that meant no hot water, no heat, and my pipes burst, and I was on the verge of getting evicted, and I managed to have enough money to like find a new place to live just in time. I mean, that was a long time ago, but it happened. And so in there we get moments in our lives like this. By and large, I don't think life is as dramatic as those moments, though. And so one of the reasons why tarot is interesting, and one of the reasons it's hard to read initially, is that the definitions that we get out of books, even the best books, frequently go to the most exceptional meanings of the cards. So the situation I just described in my life was perfectly summed up by this card, but that is, for most of us, or once or twice in a life sort of level of despair. There are just weeks where we're paycheck to paycheck because we spent unwisely, and we feel kind of money wise, or even emotionally, we spend too much. I use this expression a lot this week because the past few weeks have been really exhausting for me. I'm an introvert, and a lot of people think introvert means shyness, and it doesn't. Introversion, you can be an outgoing introvert. Introversion means how you spend and refill your energy. Introverts' pool of energy is spent in social settings and is reinvested, I guess, or rejuvenated in solitude. So that's what introversion means. So this can be, I talk about spending my social capital. I have to manage my social capital wisely, because if I don't, I wind up feeling this way. And so with the Four of Pentacles, this can be an emotional state of, I need to be alone, I need to be quiet, and I need to be in introversion mode so that I don't wind up emotionally spent this way. So we get that emotional sense, which I think the Wild Unknown does exceptionally well. So if we're not careful, and these are these blends of tarot that I just adore when the meanings sort of flow one into the other. And the six does this nicely too. In a second, I'll talk about that. So there's an emotional capital that can be spent, or social capital that can be spent. Now, again, I do believe that all the cards have their shadow and light sides and their positive and negative sides. So I think that this card has that too. And there are times where you're going to get this card in an advice mode, or what's the best that can happen? The best that can happen is destitution? Again, maybe if we're already in really bad shape. The positive sides of this, or the light sides of this, I think, is choosing principles over comfort. So, when we really believe in something, sometimes we have to give up the easy path. What's right isn't always what's comfortable. What's right isn't always what's easy. And I think we get that in this card. There's definitely a survival here, a survival in the face of trouble. There's a getting through it together, because rarely are the figures in this card pictured alone. So there's a togetherness in this suffering. So shared adversity. There's also potentially the choice of an ascetic lifestyle. So choosing to live simply or in poverty for religious or political reasons. So again, layers to this suit, which is why it's not just to me about money. So then in the 6, we take that and we develop it further. And so there are times where we need charity, and that's what lifts us out of our poverty. And I don't just mean that financially. There are times where we just need help. There are times where we need a hand, whether it's moving or paying off debt, or choosing a career path, or asking for references. There are just times where we need the assistance of others. And this card explores that concept. So there's an acceptance of help. But there's a giving of help too. So one of the interesting things about this, again, I feel like this is the most successful of the Waite Smith suits, because I feel like she did a beautiful job keeping these cards specific enough that we get what they mean, but nebulous enough that we don't know necessarily who we are and so I may be this person, or I may be this person, or I may be this person. I may be the person who's asking for help. I may be the person who's kind of off to the side, not asking for it, and hoping someone will notice. Or I may be the benefactor in some cases, because in life, again, sometimes we're the giver and sometimes we're the receiver. That's how life works. So she keeps it so open that we get such an amazing opportunity when reading this card to sort of decide who's where. So this can be generosity. It can be being a benefactor or a donor, or having a benefactor or a donor. Help, accepting the help. One thing that I think too is interesting is the idea of a measured response to something. So again, what Pamela Coleman Smith gives us is these scales. And some people interpret that as like a not pedantic. What's the word I'm looking for? Like a sort of false generosity, or like not giving too much. But there's also a measured response, because as I said with the 4, sometimes we need to measure what we can afford to put out or to give, and so a measured response we get out of that. So I think that there's that in there. So that's the positive side of it. Now the shadow side of it, we get potentially lording this over others, lording our position over others, or constantly being in a state of subservience, or having to kowtow to get what we want, selling out. I talked about that in another card earlier, begging, being begged. So on the converse of that, there's a desperation that continues over from the 5. And like so much in this suit, there's a middle ground, a grounded middle ground that we're going for. The Suit of Pentacles is not about extremes, and the negative consequences of the suit are when we go too far in one direction. So we can give too much, or we can give too little. What we're aiming for is the moderate road. this is a very moderation themed suit because it's practical. You know, it's not all forward energy like the wands. It's not all pouring your heart out like the cups. And it's not all intellectual like the swords. This is measured. This is grounded, you know, and I keep coming back to that. So there's the 6. So moments ago, I talked about how the 7 of Pentacles in the Wild Unknown almost kept me from buying the deck. Weirdly, this card comes up for me so much now. You know, and you just accept it. Like, there is an energy to it. It's not necessarily the energy that I'm used to, but I get it. And, you know, again, I'm always sort of reading this card on any card I see. This one in the Fountain Tarot makes me laugh because it looks like Gordon Ramsay to me. So, for what it's worth. The Prismavisions tarot, which I did not take out, is interesting with this card because you can't tell whether the person is harvesting or planting, and I think that adds an interesting layer to it. But it in a way, it's not super accurate because this isn't necessarily a card of harvesting. To me, it's a card of having done the work and seeing the results come out, but we're not harvesting it yet. Like, to me, that's the 9 and the 10. The 10 really. In my opinion, but I know that this card frequently gets associated with harvest. And I have it in my notes. I'm looking at it now. But I think it is about seeing the energy and the effort that you've put come into fruition. And it's setting the stage for the next phase. It's sort of stepping back to explore what you've made. You know, it's like a painter who needs to step back from the canvas a little bit to see what the overall thing is, you know, because they're so focused on the details. You're so focused on that little square inch or that little, you know, glint of light. You need to step back and see what the whole canvas looks like. And so you get that here. So there is a sense of kind of stepping back and looking at the big picture with the 7 of Pentacles. I do think that there is a harvesty metaphor here of reaping what you sow, whether that's literally or metaphorically. And yeah. And then the shadow side of this is sitting back and letting things rot on the vine. You know, it makes me think of Chekhov. If you're, you know, a Russian literature aficionado, or you've ever, you know, if you're a theater nerd like I am and you've ever read Chekhov, there's always this sort of laconic, sanguine, you know, I don't even know if those are the words I'm reaching for, but they have that sound of like, on RuPaul's Drag Race a few years ago, one of the characters described, you know, one of the queens described their state as like flase da, which isn't a word. You know, it was like blase and la-di-da and all sort of rolled into one. So but there's the sense of like sitting back. There's like this boredom that just seeps out of the characters in a Chekhov play sometimes because they're just so bored with life, which makes Chekhov sound really dull. It's not when it's done well, but there's this kind of like, oh God, it's seething with boredom. And so the shadow side of this is like just sitting back and letting the world go on. And, you know, there's a line in Uncle Vanya, which is where I was going with this, the Chekhov play. And they're like, you know, we've been sitting here and like the wheat is out rotting in the fields. That's the shadow side of this card. You know, it's just that laconic sort of, you know, thing. Not moving ahead, not reaping the benefits of the work that we've done or the planning we've made. So again, there's this sort of like laziness is probably the most appropriate word for this, to this card in its shadow aspect. So there's the 7. Now here the Wild Unknown really wins me over, and this actually is similar to the Shadowscapes Tarot, if you have that, which is a deck I really, really love. It just does not show up well on video because it's so small. So it's one that I really, you know, I complain about decks that are too large, but I really wish that one were larger because it's so stunning. I love watercolor anyway, and I really, really wish that deck were larger because it's just, you would appreciate it so much more. Anyway, the 8. You know, we step back in the 7 and we look at the big picture, and then in the 8 we get back to work. So in that continuum, it's sort of like, okay, here's what we've made. Here's the larger scope. Here's what I've been planning. Here's what I've got so far. Now I gotta, similar to the wands, the 8, 9, and 10, is the final push to completion. So it is the hard work. It's, again, in the wands video, I talk about vocation. You do get a vocational element to this card, but in the more modern, non-religious term, where you think about vocational schools, where you go to learn a trade, and you focus on that. So there's a focus, and there's a like a gosh, I hate it when my brain does this. A rightness, like a meant to be quality to, like, this is what you're meant to be doing. This is your cast in a way. This is your the thing that you've been apprenticed to do. So you're either learning a trade, or you're doing what comes naturally. You're doing what your function is in life, in a way. And you get that with the spider, which is why I really love that. It's about paying your dues. So you do get an apprenticeship. You do get a quality there of, like, you're not quite at the top of the heap yet. You've really got to push that work. But there's also an element here of specialized or skilled labor, or just sort of it's a blue collar card in a way, in a good way, of, like, this is the work that you do, and you're working with your hands. It is very earthy in that way. So you get that it really is about work. But skill, it's skilled work. It's maybe a little repetitive, it can be a little dull, but it requires skill. So there is that element to this. And then on the shadow side, this could be laziness again, like the 7. This is where you get more the focus on the repetition and not the artistic quality. So this is like boring work. This is like factory automated work that leaves you feeling kind of empty, if that's the kind of thing that leaves you empty. This could, in its negative side, sort of indicate an outsourced work, or automated, or just chores in general. So then we get the 8. The 9 in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is my favorite suit card, I think. Earlier I said the 3 was, and I just love this image. I think it speaks to my introversion, which is one reason I love it. And there's like a protected, gentle quality to this card that I just love. And again, I feel like, this card, there's a slowness to it. We get the little snail in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which I'm sure everyone knows. You can see it there. I just love it. There is a gentleness. There is a library-like, museum-like sort of piece to this card. And it makes me think of Candide, which is said in the book, ironically, tending your own garden. But there is something nice sometimes about caring for yourself. And so this card can indicate self-care and tending your own garden, taking time to recharge. It can indicate a self-fulfillment. It could indicate retirement, retreats, so going off to sort of explore, going to a spa, just going away, retreating from, taking time to recharge. I said that, a sense of self-fulfillment, having achieved, or someone who's a solo practitioner, someone who works alone, or is a solo act, is a solo, whatever. They're a sole proprietor, to use a business term. Now, in the 78 Degrees of Wisdom, Rachel Pollack talks about this card in particular, and how the edition she had of the Rider-Waite-Smith had a shadow on the woman's face you don't get on the modern printings of it. But in that sense, there is the shadow side, literally, of turning away from. And that can be good and bad, but it does transition us to the shadow aspects, which is like turning away from a society or a community, cutting yourself off from it. using retreat as an excuse not to deal, retreating from problems that need to be dealt with, staying alone because it's easier than risking loss. So we get that aspect here with the 9. But it's one of my favorites, and again, because there is such a gentle, soothing quality to it. I love the falcon. I don't read that as meaningful, even though I learned that it was in my early days. But what you get is a connection to the natural world as a result of that, which is interesting too. Said it again. So there, that's the 9. The 10 of Pentacles is one of those cards where you sort of wonder what makes it different from like the 9 of not the 9, the 10 of Cups, because it's similar, but there's a wizened, aged quality to this that's absent from the 9. The 9 is sort of like youthful optimism, a young family. This is that family 20, 30 years in the future. In that way, I think about, again, 78 Degrees of Wisdom and Rachel Pollack thinking about this as Odysseus returning, and the only ones who recognize him are his dogs. And I read that again when I was starting out, and that always stuck with me. It was such a striking image. But there's a community here that goes beyond family or the nuclear family. Do you know? So where the 10 of Cups does feel more like mom, dad, and the kids, this is like the family of choice that we often make in life. The people around us who we've chosen and who have chosen us. So there's that aspect to this. There is the sort of communal fulfillment of a social contract, a social communion, becoming part of a community, becoming part of a group of folks who are like-minded. Feeling secure, feeling, gainfully employed, feeling generally contented. So we do get a sense of that. There's a sense of coming home from the war too, like I talked about with Odysseus. And then the shadow side of this is kind of lacking that, or the want of that, or avoidance of that. Sometimes we don't want to become part of something that might be good for us, or we may feel insecure. We may feel discontent. We may have like an insatiable quality that even the best isn't good enough. We're not willing to settle, to return to stuff I talked about in the cups. Nothing being good enough. So the shadow side of this is like, I'm not willing to settle. I'm not willing to settle down. I'm unable to settle down. I'm unable to, stop going out and sowing my oats, So there's that quality to the 10 in its shadow aspect. And then we come to our final court. The Court of Pentacles. Like most of the rest of the suit, this is my favorite court for some reason, and I don't know why. I have to thank Pamela Coleman Smith for it, because I feel like her court is just it just draws me in a way. Maybe the warmth, and again, this is the universal weight, so it's the Mary Hanson Roberts coloration. Again, let me go on a tangent for a sec. What I wish they had done was taken the line drawings and colored them this way, because I love, and a lot of people hate it, I love the heavy lines of those lithographs. I wish that these had that, but had these warm colors. One of the things about the Waite Smith deck, I just don't like the colors. They just feel too soft. Like, I want a richer palette. That's one of the complaints a lot of people have about the Fountain Tarot too. But the Court of Pentacles in the Universal Waite in particular, but in the Waite Smith printings other than this, they're very warm, and so that may be why. I've always loved the Knight of Pentacles. Like, I've always felt drawn to him. Again, I don't know why. I don't know if that says something about me. There's an exercise that the Tarot School does in their correspondence course where you actually choose your favorite aces and choose your favorite court cards, and you sort of do an array meditation on them. and it tells you a little bit about yourself. But what you're supposed to do is divorce yourself from the images, I think, if I remember it correctly. And I've always had a hard time doing that because I'm not a very visual person, but with tarot I am. Anyway, I've digressed yet again. The Page of Pentacles. So this is a very studenty card. The pages for me are always very studenty, but I feel like this is the quintessential student. In this case, it may be a student who's interested in economics or accounting. You know what I mean? Someone who's starting down that path of a numbers-based career, like a financial career, or someone in family planning, a planner or a city planner. You know, someone who's got this interest in a practical road. It could be someone who's looking for a group to be part of, someone looking for a community, or just someone who's generally on the verge of just starting their life. And then again, we get into the shadow side. So it could be difficulty conceiving. You know, well, I missed that. This could be news of a child too. So this could be like, you know, the impending birth of a child. This could be delayed news of a child. It could be difficulty conceiving. It could be someone good with numbers or money, but who doesn't use that skill. Someone who's bad at planning, or who is good at it but doesn't do it. You know, with the pages in their negative sign, there's like squandered potential, so you get that there. Someone who is resisting becoming part of something that could help them, or someone, you know, Peter Pan syndrome, someone who just won't grow up. So there's our page. Excuse me. As I said, the Knight is my favorite. I don't know why, but I see the Knight of Pentacles as a really practical person, and probably I think I may be drawn to the Knight of Pentacles because, as a Pentacle, he's much more even tempered than the other Knights, and I'm not even tempered. He's thoughtful, not in like a cerebral way, in like a careful way, in being full of care in the actions that he takes. He's not as active as the other Knights. He's probably someone young who's looking to settle down. You know, he's not like the Knight of Cups, who's like the romancer. You know, he's got more of a realistic view of relationships. So he's looking to settle down or start a family, get down to the business, you know, of life, of adulthood. Someone who's probably going to make a good parent someday. They're not quite there because they are a Knight. Someone who's out there looking for a career to settle into, who has a sense that settling isn't something bad. It's something that you do. You know, it's something that you choose a path and you go on it. Someone just at the start of their career who has some realistic goals and desires. Someone who has a realistic view of life and its expectations, and who's just content with that. There's like a contentedness to the Knight of Pentacles. And then, so again, in its shadow temptation, in its shadow iteration, you get someone who's hot-tempered, who can't settle down, who probably would be better off if he did, but he can't. Again, I'm using that pronoun generically here. Avoiding adulthood, who can't imagine being a parent, someone who really just settling down makes them anxious or restless. They can be a little bit of a drifter. They go from job to job or relationship to relationship. They have a tendency to set unrealistic goals or expectations, or just to be generally discontented. So the shadow side of the Knight is, you know, is that. There's like a want of balance, which the shadow side of the Knight lacks. The Queen of Pentacles, again, my favorite queen, I think, in the deck. I've avoided this word for many years. I talked about this, I think, in the Cups video, because it just felt too stereotypical for the queen to be a nurturer. But I've accepted it over time, because, again, I've accepted that the gender assignations of the court cards don't... They're archetypal in their way, or they're stock characters in a way. They're not given to a particular gender. So the mother, in the Wild Unknown, it's the mother, doesn't necessarily mean it's a woman. And in that way, I've kind of accepted nurturing from the queen in a way that I hadn't. You know, sometimes you got to get over your political stuff in order to read these cards, because they were written in a time where that, you know, politics was very, very different. But this is the Queen of Pentacles is the nurturer of nurturers, in my opinion. So she may be someone who's a counselor or a career advisor, a benefactor, an advisor, a coach, for example. um like a community activist, a community developer, maybe someone who's in wealth management or money and making money and watching it grow. So she could be a banker or like a stockbroker in the best sense of CPA. This could be someone who's an agent or a champion of other people's works. You know what I mean? So, a boss or an agent who sells others stuff for them, who gets their work out there and cares for the talent. You know, um, and then the shadow side of that, is someone who resents or resists nurturing, someone who maybe needs counseling, or who uses a position of counselor to ill effect, to maybe hurt rather than help, someone who's bad with money, or someone who can't be bothered to help others. So that's the shadow side of the queen. And then finally the king. Um, Again, you know, he's sort of the scion of the family line. You know what I mean? Excuse me again. I'm getting a cold. He's he's a sage. He's the CEO. He's the king of the castle. You know, he's the head of the family. Again, divorcing ourselves from gender. I'm using he generically. This could be a man or a woman, but the architect, the patriarch or matriarch. Um, the one who's always there for others, the one you go to for advice. Um, you know, just the sort of embodiment of balance and maturity. This could be a really good CEO, like the really great CEOs you read about sometimes. Um, a director, um, the head of some. You know, this is the kind of person you want to be in charge, because they're very balanced, they're very even. They do not just they're not just earth. They do fully encompass all the other elements as I talked about. So you do get a sense of like a more broad picture of uniting all of the parts. And someone who's generous in a very responsible way, and there's a responsibility as well. So this is a responsible person. And then again, on the shadow side, it's someone who's a little shaky, someone who should be better at leading than they are, someone who should know better but doesn't. Maybe someone who resists being in charge because they don't want the responsibility. Um, you know, someone who's irresponsible, someone who refuses to help, someone who can't be counted on, who just won't give what's necessary even when they have it. You know, so again, there's the shadow side of the king. So that is the walkthrough of the Suit of Pentacles. Again, really deep suit. I think that may go beyond at least what I learned when I started out. So that's the minors, the minor arcana. We've gone through the swords, the cups, the wands, and now the pentacles. Next up, I am going to go through the major arcana. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to divide those up yet, because it's too much to do in one video, especially with how much I ramble and go off on tangents. So I'm thinking the simplest thing for me to do maybe just to go through 0 through 11 and then 12 to 22. We'll see um, how that works, or 21 rather. That may be how I do it. I may use different decks. I'm not sure. I'm still thinking about that. But as always, I hope this is helpful. Let me know if it was. Let me know if there's anything you want to see. Um, Thank you for staying all the way through this if you did. And just be well and be good, and keep reading and keep commenting, and let me know how you are. Talk soon.